All right. Carol, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
All right. This is DJ Strictly Revolutionary right here on your very own KRFH.net. And we got special guest today. This is Carol Brouillet. She makes deception dollars. And I'll let her explain in her own words really what she's all about and maybe give a website so people can check you out.
Sure. Well, I've been an activist since 1992. I have a website, communitycurrency.org, and I've actually organized many conferences on strategies to transform the global economy with a focus on money. And trying to educate people about money is very difficult in global economics. Although right now there is a lot of more interest than there had been in the 90s when I was working on it. But since September 11th, I have been one of the first people out on the street demanding a congressional investigation of 9/11 and also organizing the first citizens' inquiry into 9/11. And I'm a media activist, so naturally I try to produce media. And the deception dollars were a tool, a flyer actually, that we passed out at anti-war rallies to overcome the media censorship and to get the basic facts about 9/11 out to people. And it was the most successful flyer I ever made, and surprise of surprise, people actually paid to get them to pass them out to their friends and to people at anti-war rallies. So we have published over 7 million of them, and that helped fund the first showing of the 9/11 Truth documentary, Aftermath, Unanswered Questions from 9/11, as well as the San Francisco International Inquiry into 9/11. So I've also been one of the founders of the 9/11 Truth Alliance, the Northern California 9/11 Truth Alliance, and I ran for Congress in 2006, 2008 on an impeachment 9/11 Truth peace platform. So I basically consider myself a hyper-activist. I have 3 sons. 2 of them are still in high school. One's away at college right now. And I try to balance being a mom with all the political work that I do.
So yeah, you definitely hyper-activist is a word that I've used also to try and describe activism overdrive practically, and you definitely sound like you got your hands full being a mom and all that. What did the first issue of Deception Dollar look like? What did it have on it?
I think it said United States of Apathy, and it was basically just green on white. We printed 10,000 of them, and it cost me $600, I remember. And we passed them out in October 2002 at an anti-war rally, and there were just 7 websites, because there were really just about 7 websites on 9/11. In fact, I remember giving a friend of mine who sort of created the architecture for my website $1,000 to create a better 9/11 website, because we didn't have very many back in those days.
Yeah, they're a wealth of information. I was going to say that the currency that you're making seems like it's much more worthwhile than handling the Federal Reserve notes nowadays. I'm sure you're, big on the Federal Reserve and maybe like things that you'd find in documentaries like America from Freedom to Fascism and Money as Debt and Zeitgeist, the monetary section of it at least. Would you like to speak for a minute maybe about like compare maybe your currency to our Federal Reserve notes and maybe tell the listeners why yours is much better than theirs are?
Well, mine does have some great websites on them, and actually, of the 7 million we've published, we have the 9/11 bills, which have the best 9/11 websites truth websites that I could identify on them. But we also made election deception dollars, media deception dollars, and conception dollars. And so the election deception looks at the websites that are looking at how our elections have been stolen, how the process has been stolen from us. We don't actually have real representation in Washington, D.C. I think you know that. Mm-hmm. The media deception dollars, they were actually to promote a book, True Lies by Guerrilla News Network, which 9/11 Truth was just one of the issues that they looked at. They also looked at stolen elections and depleted uranium and all sorts of other things. And another friend of mine made a film called The Corporation, which looks at how pathological corporations were. But it's a sometimes you have to take baby steps to help people understand things. And I know with my work on money, in particular, I had to start with educating people about global economics and then get to how money is created, because people, the economics in some ways it's to complicate things so that people don't understand what's going on, so that they could be fraudulently ripped off by the people who do create money and do organize things in the financial realms. I mean, this is why there was this giant bubble, and we are in the process of the biggest financial heist, transference of wealth in history from the many to the few. And how money is created, basically banks created out of thin air, and it's not backed by anything except belief and the government's willingness to accept it in payment for taxes. And many people don't realize that the Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, and it really is private banks, and they've been making out like bandits. And we do see right now a couple of bills being introduced into Congress for transparency of the Federal Reserve, as well as the abolition of the Federal Reserve. And I know I spoke at an End the Fin rally in San Francisco in November, and I was concerned because one of the bills proposed by Ron Paul, I think he's revised it and given it a new number now, but when he did it originally, it was in August, before the bailout, and in some ways it would just nationalize the Federal Reserve, and the American people would assume it's debt. Well, they've been rewriting the rules considerably since September, and what has happened, too, is there's been a big shift in liabilities. What they're trying to do is those astronomical debts that the speculators incurred that are devastating the balance sheets of the banks. They want to transfer those huge debts, those giant liabilities, from the private sector to the public. And this is one thing that happened in the 80s. And Michelle Chossudovsky, who has a great website, globalresearch.ca, he gave a lecture recently in Canada about this, and how in the 80s, when we had the debt crisis for third world countries, what happened was the IMF and the World Bank took full advantage of the debt crisis to force these countries into adopting horrific structural adjustment programs.
Yeah, and that's where they say, if you want our money after our neo-colonialist policies have basically destroyed your nation from within, and like things like the economic hitman, they say these are the conditions of us helping you, and then they take on the debt, which may be an absolute trap, and then they say, let us loot and pillage your land and take down, and let us control your currency and all that kind of stuff. That's the SAPs you're talking about, right?
Right. They basically privatize the public assets and force people off their land and just do horrific things. And there's even a special word called SAP, because Structural Adjustment Program, ED. And the third world knows this really well. And actually, when I was organizing my conferences, Kevin Donaher from Global Exchange was saying we should be doing this in the South. So when they had the first World Social Forum in Brazil in January 2001, I tried to get North Americans to go there. And there were thousands of people from hundreds of countries who were all opposed to the World Bank, the IMF, militarism, transnational corporations. And they've held some sort of World Social Forum, and sometimes decentralized, for years since the first World Social Forum, and most recently it was held in Belém. And I think about 100,000 people went all very much opposed to the IMF, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, and the leaders of many South American nations actually went to the World Social Forum instead of going to Davos, which was boycotted this year by the famous stars. And the activists were opposing Davos. In Davos, at the World Economic Forum last year, they denied that there was a global crisis, and this year they tried to say that it was behind us, when it's still, going to get worse, and they're sort of in denial. And the World Economic Forum, what they generally do is prescribe more of the same bad medicine, which only exasperates the problem, makes the rich richer, the poor poorer, and allows transnational corporations to dominate, loot, kill. And in Belém this year, they were working on plans to save the resources, gathering regionally to oppose some of the biggest, most devastating World Bank giant projects that they're trying to force on the Amazonian area. There was a lot of opposition to the policies of the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, Jim Rogers he was just on Al Jazeera saying basically we need to get rid of the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank. He also called out our Federal Reserve System. Him and George Soros were very successful currency speculators.
Well, I think those institutions have not served humanity or the planet. They certainly could be gotten rid of. I don't think they're capable of being reformed to actually serve us. I think...
Well, isn't it like I think our country controls nearly like 60% of the World Bank or something, and I took a third world politics class, and so these were like central issues, what these guys do, and I think one of the things one of the book authors said about people like Lawrence Summers who say that Africa's under polluted and these kind of things, that these kind of mentalities are ubiquitous throughout the system, and that these guys that go to the countries, they're supposed to understand culturally and what's going on with it. They know more about the 4-star, 5-star hotels than they do about really like what the needs are of those people.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think there is somewhat of a shift that's happening right now, because the rest of the world is recognizing the criminality of the United States and how it has forced these toxic assets and policies on other countries and basically the dollar hegemony, which has dominated since the Bretton Woods institutions were created back in 1945. The U.S. has just acted like a global criminal, and polluted the entire global financial system. And it's threatening all these other countries, too, who have lots of U.S. dollars and also the liabilities that go with the speculation, with participating, with trusting that the U.S. assets were backed when they weren't being regulated, that they weren't being overseen. And so what's happened is you have this credit crisis right now where all these crooks, the elite who have been manipulating for their own benefit and trying to pocket the money, they don't trust each other anymore. So it's hard for them to actually do business because that trust doesn't exist. And they're wondering, well, how do we come up with a new financial architecture that doesn't include the biggest sharks, the biggest crooks? But they're all crooks, so there's a real lack of trust, and whether they're going to be able to pull it off or not. I think the G20 is going to try to meet again in March to hammer something out, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do it because there is a real lack of trust, because they have, been behaving in criminal manners. And also, I think you've seen that in the polls, most of the world doesn't believe the official story of 9/11.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get into. Got you for maybe about 10 minutes. About 9/11. There was this guy I was talking about on air before he came on. They brought this Waleed Shoebat here by the college Republicans. They're like incredibly well funded, and this campus is like social environmental justice illusion, but it tries to act like it's socially just and conscious about things. But so this guy came who's supposed, his name was Waleed Shoebat. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, but he's basically funded by the evangelicals, and he says, after 9/11, basically he's been on a tour talking about, I am a terrorist and I understand that the Israeli-Arab conflict is about Jew hatred and all this weird stuff. And I brought up the intelligence ties, the Israeli intelligence ties. Have you seen Jason Bermas's film, Fabled Enemies? I got him coming on next week.
Oh, good. Actually, I just got it in the mail yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to see it, but I've been wanting to see it. I hear it's very, very good.
Yeah, well, what you'll watch in the film, about a third of the way through it, they talk about the Israeli intelligence ties, and I brought that stuff up to him. This guy was just dancing around it. There's no way he'd answer the question straightforward. He just would throw questions back at me. So what do you think, 9/11, inside job, government complicity, special interests of the elite? What's your take, in maybe 30 seconds on that?
On the deception dollar, there is CIA, Mossad, ISI, MI6 in the webs in the different corners. I didn't notice that. I think that there are elements of the various intelligence agencies. You can see their fingerprints and their participation to some degree. Mm-hmm. What I don't know is what the original plan was and who intervened to botch it, because I do believe that 9/11 was the most botched special operation of all times. I don't think there would be a truth movement if it wasn't botched. Mm-hmm. And what intelligence played what role to botch it, I don't know. I do know that the United States government has definitely was responsible for the stand down that day. That they
2
were
hours. There's no planes flown up for those.
Right, the failure of the military to intercept. The idea that we were surprised, and couldn't have foreseen the possibility is just totally wrong, ludicrous, false, and that Cheney was issuing orders from the Presidential Emergency Operating Center on the morning of September 11th, that Cheney should be questioned about what those orders were, that the guy coming in, planes 50 miles out, planes 30 miles out, 10 miles out, do the orders still stand? So Cheney should be held, should be put on the stand. Rumsfeld Myers also should be put on the stand. There's a lot of top U.S. government officials who have said things that just have to be questioned. Mm-hmm. And then one of the biggest smoking guns, of course, is still Building Number 7, which wasn't even addressed in the 9/11 Commission report, but has all the characteristics of controlled demolition. Now, they can't explain that. I don't know what the original plan was, but certainly there were explosives used to bring down Building Number 7. The question is, who had access to the building, who did it, and who are the people who gained from this financially, politically, in so many ways, who have really profited from the whole 9/11. There's so many documents pointing to the Project for a New American Century. Geopolitically, who's the big winner in this? And then there's the short-term gains and then the long-term gains. So I don't know the answer to all these questions. I think we still need to keep on asking and still keep on digging to find out the truth and to get the suppressed documents. Now, I was in Denver this last week for the American Citizen Summit, and there are people from across all the party lines in conversation with one another. And one of the things that everyone could agree upon is transparency. Now, what we don't want is a government that is secretive, hiding things from us, lying to us, destroying our civil liberties, and then waging illegal wars on the rest of the world, pissing everybody else off. I frankly, don't really buy the Al-Qaeda myth. I think to some degree, Al-Qaeda, if it ever exists, was created to a large degree by the CIA when they had the largest covert action in our history back in the 80s in their attempt to bring down the Soviet Union, and they funded bin Laden and all the Islamic terrorists. So they nurtured or tried to create the myth of these. They needed an enemy. They had to create an enemy. If you see The Power of Nightmares by
they set up the whole terrorist network. That's one thing that I got the guy to mention last night, because he was talking about all this, terrorist this, terrorist that. Saddam Hussein had these weapons and people yelling out. We gave them to him, and it's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. They need an other in order to frighten people into giving up their power, and it's really sort of like a racket where the mob comes along, breaks some windows, and then says, "Okay, give us some money, we'll protect you." Mm-hmm. That's what's happened to the United States, except the mob is the White House and the military-industrial complex, and instead of breaking a few windows, they knocked down a few buildings and killed a few thousand people and said, "Okay, give us more money, we'll protect you." And
then take away your
then their actions could actually, encourage genuine terrorism. I mean, more people will probably hate us and think of us as the enemy, and I would say rightfully so, especially for killing and bombing and terrorizing innocent people in countries that we're occupying. I mean, I would be outraged.
Yeah. Let's move along real quick, so I'm gonna cut you loose in a little bit. But basically, the Obama administration still has all the same powers that Bush consolidated. We're still under the boot, basically, of the government more than ever before. We got the military operating on U.S. soil in violation of Posse Comitatus for the second time in history, and the first was Hurricane Katrina, which was a massively questionable event, just like 9/11. I'm gonna have to do a show just about that one day. Would you speak about your new deception dollar and what you're seeing with this Obama administration?
Well, sadly, I think the new deception dollar will feature someone holding an Obama mask, and beneath it, the nameplate regime rotation with Cheney and Bush in the background, and instead of unmasked state-sponsored terrorism on the top, it would say continuity of government. And we did go into continuity of government on 9/11, and so we have been operating under different rules which are flagrantly violating the Constitution ever since then. And I don't think that's changed with the new face in the White House. The fact that he's continuing these military operations against Pakistan is very foreboding, and threatening China, and going along with this giant financial heist. I think the stimulus bill is deeply flawed, and it will probably only divide the country. It's not addressing the root problems. We really have to get rid of a debt-based monetary system, which concentrates wealth and power, destroying the earth in the process. There's other ways to create money that serve people and life. My website, Community Currency, looks at creating local, transparent, honest systems. We could do that at the local level, state level, the regional level. Right now we have 46 states facing bankruptcy. You have efforts to secede from the Union. You have increased polarization. Mm-hmm. We need to have more transparency. I'm glad you're doing your radio show. I think the key thing is getting information out to people so that to counter the propaganda that we see in the corporate dominant press, because a lot of people just don't even have a clue about what's true and what's real in the country today, and they're really hungry for information. Thank God we have the internet, and we have to raise our voices as much as possible to educate people and let them so that they're not scammed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you deeply for coming on the show. I know you're really busy trying to put out that new Obama dollar. You give everybody your websites and stuff real quick one more time, and maybe a documentary or so that you would suggest.
Okay, my website's communitycurrency.org, and 9/11: The Myth and Reality by David Ray Griffin is a great starting point. 9/11 Press for Truth is also a good introduction to 9/11 for beginners who haven't looked at it. Improbable Collapse, the demolition of our republic is a good one, looking at the demolitions. There's some great books out there. I have a lot of links from my website. Also, 911truth.org is a good umbrella organization that has that points towards some excellent resources as well. And there's more and more 9/11 Truth groups out there, including the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, whose work is very solid and compelling. There's groups internationally in Australia, Japan, Canada, Europe right now, and all across the United States. So I think people, when they get exposed to the truth, it's hard for them to go back to sleep, and it continues to grow. So I'm hopeful.
So yeah, ignorance is bliss, but we got to wake people up from their comfortable little slumber. And I thank you for the work that you do. It's amazing. We definitely, I'm part of the 9/11 Truth crew up here as well, and we got a bunch of those from Gabriel Day that we distribute on occasion. And keep up the great work. I look forward to seeing the new issue.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Carol. I'll keep in touch with you. Touch base. Maybe you can come back on a little bit later in the semester. I'd love to have you back.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
All right. Good luck, and talk to you later. Thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Carol Brouillet, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed the interview. Gonna play some advertisements, pay them bills and such for a minute, but this is DJ Strictly Revolutionary on KRFH.net, 610 AM. Check out my website, jrobo.us, and also check out our KRFH blog online. Look up Spring 2009. I'll have Carol's information and stuff posted on there. Hope you can check out some of those websites. And everybody out there, sit tight. I'll be back with y'all in a few minutes.